Okay, so yes, let me quickly give you an overview over the KIT Lecture Translator system that we're using at KIT now since 2012, actually, so since 8 years, for bridging the language barrier inside the lecture halls. So at KIT, first of all, if you haven't seen it in the chat already, you can see the system in action. If you go to this website where we are currently translating all the talks that we're having in this session. And we will also provide transcriptions and translations later for the recording of this session, so that the recordings later will be available with subtitles in different languages. So lectures and talks, as you all know, and as it is quite common knowledge in the academic world, are of high importance because they provide quality content on interesting topics, are often with a certain degree of high quality produced. And they are worthwhile to translate because there are many languages in the world that are interesting to a wide variety of people and to a large audience, but often not accessible to the complete audience, and not everybody might be able to access the lectures that he or she might be interested in, not because he cannot access them technically through the World Wide Web and electronic communication. We can have virtual conferences, but they often cannot access them due to the language barrier because they simply do not understand the language spoken in the lecture. So I'm sure there are many interesting lectures for me in, let's say, Spain or China, but I'm not able to follow them because I don't understand the language. So this is a topic that we also see as economically and societally relevant. Especially at KIT, we have the situation that we like to teach in German, and it is important that we teach in German because teaching in different languages is important from a diversity of thinking. So the language that we speak influences the way we think, and the way we think influences the language that we speak. And so having many different languages and teaching in many different languages also means that we have many different schools of thought. And as we all know, diversity is very important. A monoculture, just like in biology, is very dangerous in the academic world because it will hinder progress, and we will not be able to explore all avenues of thinking as we actually should. So we teach in German at KIT, and then if we have foreign students that come to KIT, they take a language class so that they can speak German at a conversational level. But of course, there's a difference between speaking German at a conversational level and following a lecture in a special topic. You need a completely different type of language skill for that. So often foreign students at KIT have difficulties following the lectures in German and don't get a complete understanding of the class that's being taught. So currently KIT has approximately 24% foreign students. If you compare that to an American university has something like 50% foreign students. And the reason is partly because they teach in English, and English is a very much more common foreign language than German. So this is also a disadvantage, for example, for a German university when it comes to competing for international students. So when it comes to bridging the language barrier in situations like a lecture or conference, simultaneous interpretation, conference interpretation is usually a solution. For example, the European Parliament operates in that way. Their plenary sessions are all being simultaneously translated into all 24 operating languages of the Parliament. But of course, it is expensive. So the European Parliament spends something like 300 million euros per year for translations. If you look at all translations, not only speech translation, but also text translation within the European Union, you get a cost of about 1.3 billion euros. And of course, for a German state-run university, using human interpreters in their classes is way too expensive. We simply cannot afford them. But even if all German universities were able to afford interpreters, it wouldn't work because there are not enough interpreters available to service all lectures that are happening. So here we have a situation where human interpreters would never be employed. And there we have a gap for language interpretation services that we try to fill by an automatic translation service. And this automatic translation service is the KIT Lecture Translator. And as we've been using it since 2012, we found out that it is actually effective in many ways. So the obvious one is that within a lecture, you can actually translate simultaneously. So the result is shown on a web page, and the students can follow the transcriptions and the translations in written form on this web page as the lecture goes on. So that is, of course, of importance. But there are also other usages. For example, if you think of accessibility in terms of accessibility. So we have feedbacks from students that are hard of hearing that find the system very helpful because now they get the automatic transcript in the original language, and it helps them to follow the lecture if they are hearing impaired. But there are also other usages. So for example, lectures are now currently very often recorded, just like this session is being recorded. So we now host these lectures together with the transcription and translations on our website. And then a 90-minute lecture is now suddenly searchable. So you can now search in the lecture for specific topics, and you can search for them in the transcription, you can search for them in the translation, and you can even search for them on the in the text on the slide. So this now becomes, for example, an interesting tool when it comes to preparing for an exam or for simply working through the lecture again. And if you're only interested in a tiny portion of a 90-minute lecture, you can now easily find it. And if you don't understand the language, you now can read along the transcription and the translation. So there are actually many side effects that make a transcription and a translation of a lecture, both online and offline, very worthwhile and very valuable for people that want to learn what is being taught in that lecture. So from a technical point of view, this is realized by something which is called spoken language translation, which essentially is a combination of things like automatic speech recognition, then inserting punctuation and casing into what has been recognized by the speech recognition system, and then having a text translation system that translates the recognition result into the target languages. And there are different modes in which these systems can be run. For example, you can have turn-based systems when you have dialogues, but here for lectures, we need something that runs continuously on a never-ending stream of speech and produces transcriptions and translations with a very low latency. And that is one of the challenges that we have with this system. So just to give you a short history of the research and technical development that is behind the system. So a first prototype was actually presented in 2005 by KIT and our partner laboratory at Carnegie Mellon. And it was a system that could translate from English to Spanish. And we gave a first demonstration. We showed the feasibility that we were actually able to do something like machine simultaneous translation. And then in the time between 2005 and 2012, we did continuous improvements. So we improved the basic technology for speech recognition and machine translation. We prepared the deployment of additional languages. For example, at KIT, we don't care about translation from English to Spanish, but we want to translate from German, for example, into English, but also, for example, into languages like Mandarin, because we have a large Chinese student body. And so we did this over the next couple of years, next decade almost. And then in 2012, we actually took the system into production at KIT. We inaugurated it in the summer of 2012. And since 2012, we've been running the system in 4 large major lecture halls at KIT. So that's what I already said. So these are the main components. So if you are interested in the technology behind it, one thing you should always keep in mind is that there's actually a surprisingly large gap between spoken language and written language. We as humans do not realize or perceive that normally in our daily dealings. But for example, if you give somebody a the transcript of a lecture to read, it's very difficult for the person to actually read the verbatim transcript of an oral speech. It's something that is completely different from what you're used to in text. So we have these auxiliary components that try to structure and clean up the transcript of the verbatim spoken word sequence into something that is more like text and can be more easily read, and then the result is being translated. And in order to be able to actually service many lectures in parallel, we have a cloud-based infrastructure. So we stream the audio from the lecture halls into the central KIT compute center, and there the transcriptions and translations are being performed, and there's a web server that hosts the translations and provides the translations. And now since 2019, we started to actually scale to all lecture halls. And the scaling is made possible by the technical or by the introduction of lecture recording systems in all of KIT lecture halls. So we also do a lot of lecture recording nowadays at KIT, and we use this little box called a lecture recorder, which records the signal from the projector and the audio from the presenter. But these boxes are also able to stream the audio from the lecture to our servers. So wherever a lecture recorder is installed in a lecture hall at KIT, we can also now service it with the KIT Lecture Translator system. So roughly 2 lecture halls per year are being converted, so that in a couple of years we can actually service many more lecture halls and reach many more students and many more lecturers. That's what I wanted to quickly say about the lecture translator system. Let me just quickly add a couple of thoughts to the Corona situation. So nowadays, due to Corona, a lot of teaching is done in electronic form, except for example via Zoom or other video conferencing systems, and that is of course a challenge, because now the students need their screen for watching the slides. Before that, they were in the lecture hall and could watch the slides. So it's sort of a challenge from the point of view that we originally thought it's for live audiences, and they bring their laptops, tablet PCs, smartphones with them, and they can watch the slides on this large screen where they are being projected, and then they can read the translations and transcriptions on their devices. Now the device is needed for actually seeing the slides. So if we're lucky, our audience has 2 screens that they can use. For example, a program like Zoom actually enables us to at least inject 1 language as subtitles into it. But as it turns out, during the Corona situation, the recordings of the lectures actually have become much more important. And so being able to service these offline recordings has become very important. So what we did is now that we provide now also a website where people can upload their videos, and they get the translations and transcriptions back, and they can export it in formats so that they, for example, can now have subtitles on the major video hosting platforms like Vimeo or YouTube, etc.